how do you recommend that they start using this approach? Because it's a big jump from what most people are doing on LinkedIn, which is, hey, sign up for my webinar, like you just said. I think I saw that post in my feed no less than 10 times already today. And it's probably uncomfortable for people at first, because again, it's very difficult to measure too.
Yeah, totally. I think a lot of marketers are probably averse to this because you can't measure it. Because I mean, you can measure some of it in terms of likes or comments, and that helps, right? Because those things can help boost your impressions. So you could look at that, but that's also really hard to tie to more meaningful marketing metrics like actual money or like newsletter list growth or webinar signups. Um, so the way I see it is like you can use some of these social metrics to track the short-term success. Like if you're posting some solid content that is getting pretty high engagement ongoing, like you have to know you're onto something, right? But then kind of continuing down that path, and then as you continue to like gain these impressions or, rewarded by the algorithm, so to speak, then you can start to drop in some of your links, like a link to an ebook, a webinar sign up, joining your email list, those kinds of things. And then over time, you'll be able to see that growth. An easy way, easy is relative, right? But an easy way to do this is if you were to create like a high engagement Twitter thread and then later on add on the link to like, hey, read more in my blog post or my ebook. Then you'll be able to see like the clicks, right? And what kind of measurable lift there is there.
I love it. Now, it's got to make, marketers uncomfortable giving away the punchline. Like, what, I guess, does that mean? And how can people tap into that?
So giving away the punchline. So in the case of that audience persona slide, it could be something like that. Like, what is your blog post or your content, whatever, maybe it's a video. What does the content ultimately lead up to? Like, what is the message you want to resonate with people, that you want to linger in their minds as they leave? You could lead with that, or you could try a couple other things. You could try what works really well with a lot of listicles is even just picking out one of those items in that list and giving out the full standalone thought. Like, 10 ways to do, or, like 10 ways not to kill your household plants. I don't know. This is top of mind for me right now. But maybe you would use the tip of like, I'm just going to make this up. Like, maybe it'll be make sure if you have a plant by a window, make sure you rotate it a couple degrees every now and then so that the leaves get an equal amount of sunlight over time and it grows healthily. Like that would be a very standalone thought, right? Like that's one piece of actionable advice. You're like, cool, like that's actually really useful. And that's something that wasn't very like, I didn't think that was common sense. And then you as the reader are going to think, oh, well, what else do they have to say? Like that was a really valuable thought versus the traditional read these 10 ways to not kill your plants, right? You'd be like, leave me alone. Give me a little bit of a taste. So using that, like one standalone list item, or you could give out like 3 to 5 items in your list and then leave the rest as like you got to click to learn more. That way you're giving that standalone value. People are able to gain value just from scrolling through your feed. And then over time as you do this, right, then it becomes like, oh, I know Mark. He always posts these amazing plant tips.
I love what you said there, because one of the things that I see is that many pieces of content out there just don't have a punchline. So if you're saying, hey, come check out whatever piece of content this is, and it lacks the punchline, well, yeah, it's not good content at the end of the day. So if you are forced to lead with value or lead with that punchline, it really makes you think, okay, why am I publishing this? What is the reason I'm doing this in the first place? What are people going to find helpful? And it kind of forces people to think a little bit
Yeah,
more.
I think so too. But back to what you said about like measuring success of this. I'm curious how you think about this because you've been posting on LinkedIn for quite a while now, a couple years now at least. Um, I mean,
I think
when you started out, were you consciously thinking about how you would track success, or were you just sort of like, let's see what happens?
like most things I do in marketing,
Yeah.
it's let's see what happens and try it and see if I can get some traction. I think for me, and I've been at it for probably
Mhm.
about 2 years. And I think at first, and people ask about this all the time, both metadata employees and marketers that I talk to, is like, how do you get started? How do you get started? I have nothing to say. I'm not that smart. I'm not that smart. And I still post stuff all the time. I just like start doing it, get yourself out there. It gets easier as you write more and more. Used to spend so much time writing these posts in the beginning, and they didn't really do that well. So I think after more reps, it becomes easier. But for me, I was just starting to see, okay, are the topics landing? And when I say landing, it's, some engagement. Who are the types of people that are engaging with it, whether it's a comment, whether it's a like, you name it. And is it kind of trending in the right direction? There are times where I think something's going to land well and it doesn't. And there are other times where I think it's not going to land and it ends up landing. So I try not to put too much thought into it. I think the really interesting thing for me and for Jason Widup, our VP of marketing, is so we have trackers set up in Gong that pick up on his name, my name, a couple other terms that we use. And I have a rough idea of like the type of people and sometimes specific people who interact with stuff that I'm posting. There are so many people who lurk and do not like and do not comment, yet they mention it on sales calls. And the second that we realize that, then we put even less like emphasis on the metrics at the end of the day because it comes up all the time and it's crazy how many lurkers enjoy it and
That
you would
is
never
so
know.
interesting. I think okay, this is gonna sound like a strange leap, but this reminds me of a podcast I was listening to recently. It was Jay Akunzo's Unthinkable podcast. He had someone, a copywriter on recently, and her name escapes me at the moment, and I will look it up. But the thing she's a copywriter whose background is in psychology. Um, so she's a
Ooh, so
great
she's a good
copywriter,
copywriter
and the one of the
then.
things that really stood out to me was, she said how one of the misconceptions of copywriting is that you need to stand out. Everyone thinks you need to pop, stand out, but that's not what you want to do. What you actually want to do is blend in with the narrative in someone else's mind. And that really stayed with me for quite a while. And that reminds me of what you're saying about like people lurking amongst your content, but bringing it up in sales calls later, because it feels to me like they're probably internalizing what you've said. And they've been like, oh, yeah, like I know Mark, like he talks about this stuff all the time. And like that was helpful. And they just think about it. They're like, yeah, like in a sense, I mean, it's even like I'm one-sided friend. Like Mark said that thing.
Yeah.
Like I that resonates with me, and they just keep it in their brains. They're like that was cool. And then when it comes up more relevantly in their day-to-day lives, they can be like, oh yeah, Mark from Metadata, he had this whole post about marketing attribution, like things like that. Mhm.
I couldn't agree more. And funny enough, there were a couple of calls that we've had where somebody who requested a demo either thought Jason or I was going to be on the demo with them because they thought we were like friends from following us on
It's
LinkedIn.
funny.
So it is pretty funny when people are lurking and it's like the whole reason why we do this is not to influence on LinkedIn. I hate that. It's just to get people from metadata, myself included, out there so you get to know the people behind the company and you get to feel like you know who's building the company, not just metadata, the
Totally.
company
Yeah, and
itself.
like people don't really like to follow just brands, right? Like I think people might root for brands in on some level, right? They might think about us, like you and me, but like no one's thinking about like, oh, I need to follow SparkToro or Metadata